progress that has occurred to date. Just noting that we did send an updated presentation this
Recording in progress.
and Josh Johnson, Director of Strategic Initiatives, will be presenting.
All right, thank you, Mayor, President, council members. Thank you for letting us give you another update on Link BRT this afternoon. Last time we were in front of you was June, so it's been some time and there's been a lot accomplished. So excited to be here to give you an update. The first slide here is just to go through some of the topics for today. So they're really in 4 category buckets here. One is just progress and accomplishments to date, upcoming milestones to look forward to, and then right of way and land acquisition, diving a little bit deeper into that, what you can expect, and then going through business forward and public engagement. I also have my colleague Jamie Rothy here with DMC, who we partner with a lot when it comes to especially business forward and communications. So she'll be giving some updates during that portion of the presentation. This is just a level set to give you an idea of what the goals are for Link, but these are the themes that we really see carry through, and hopefully you kind of see some of these things repeat during this presentation. But they are, in no particular order, expand transportation options and accessibility. So just as a reminder, Link will have level boarding on all station platforms. They'll have snow melt within the platforms. They'll have wider access doors, just to name a few of the features to make them more accessible. Reduce the need for parking. You can't totally eliminate parking. It is a necessary evil. As we say, all roads evidently or eventually lead to parking. So, but the goal is to reduce the need to have blocks and blocks of parking downtown that create dead zones in terms of activity. Also alleviate future congestion, try to capture, those single occupancy vehicles and other vehicles on the perimeter of downtown rather than coming downtown and congesting our small street grid. Also prepare for downtown growth and support sustainable development. Link Rapid Transit is far more sustainable, moves a lot more people than people traveling by themselves. So there's a sustainability component, also an equity component. We're going for a fare free system that's going to be accessible and free for all of our residents and visitors to ride. Also improve the quality of life of residents, employees, and visitors. One of the things that I've recently heard from talking to some representatives of UMR is their students are really looking for ways, to enliven our spaces downtown, especially our service parking lots. And this will give us an opportunity, once again, not to just build parking decks on service parking lots, but repurpose those, get rid of the service parking lots, move them to the perimeters, even in West Transit Village, which I'll talk about a little later, creating that village concept. This is just a slide to remind you who the partners are on this are. So City of Rochester, DMC, Mayo Clinic, SRF, and I also forgot that we're joined today by Scott Samuelson and Tina McLaughlin with SEH. So reminded me I need to update this slide to include SEH there, our right-of-way and land acquisition consultants on the project. Also like to just identify a couple of the other key teammates here. Ia Zhang's joining us remotely. We've got Josh DeFrang, who's a project manager based, mostly on construction. And then we've got Ian Cochran, project manager, and then of course Jamie Rothy. Also have a lot of support from the folks sitting over there, especially with Cindy Steinhauser, the deputy city administrator. So progress to date. This is just a slide. It's a slide that we update and bring it forward. You probably have seen it before. But really what it shows is forecasting the next 6 months. We've got some really big milestones coming up. I think of it almost like a video game where you got to pass this level to move on to the next stage. And the next stages are going to increase in difficulty and intensity. So upcoming, we've got, going into 90% design. We're going to be starting our right-of-way and land acquisitions, working with our project management oversight consultants to work with our risk register. And then hopefully I'll be more optimistic. In August, we will achieve our Small Starts Grant Agreement Award. This is a project accomplishments to date. So there are a lot of things that we've achieved and done. They seem small when you write them out in a sentence, but these do take a lot of effort and a lot of time to achieve. So one of those is State Historic Preservation Office approved and granted our 106 review. So they found that the stations located next to historically significant facilities had no adverse impact. And that was huge. Yes, that was huge because it meant we didn't have to redesign or move any of our currently designed facilities. NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. We're about 90% through that. We're anticipating a completion of that or approval of that in November. And what that does, it actually opens us up to then we can start negotiating on our right-of-way and land acquisitions. So that sets forward and then the next ball to roll. The Federal Transit Association did, I don't know, grant's not the right word, but provided us our project management oversight consultant. So that's a team of consultants that work with us to make sure that our project's on time, it's on budget, all of our plans and everything else that we're conforming to. Right now, they're actually working on the Honolulu project, which is a $10 billion project. Ours is $143 million. So, you know, price is relative, but they still hold us to the exact same standards. So, you know, they'll help help us with compliance, but also make sure that we're staying on top. Station art. So we do have concepts underway for all 12 station platforms. We've got local artists working on them. We actually just engaged another local artist to help come up with some concepts for the station art. And then the West Transit Village design. We've made some huge grounds lately, and we actually were able to identify the road layout. So in the West Transit Village, we've got, call it the loop road that goes back into Second Street. That's really critical because we need that layout in order to progress to our 90% design. So we've got the layout, and then we'll work with Mayo and their developer, Carl Sanderson, to continue to, you know, design and refine that village concept. Upcoming milestones. So the bus procurement process, last council meeting, I believe, was the October 16th. City Council approved transit to go out for an RFP for procurement for the 12 60-foot electric buses. They posted the RFP on Friday, so that RFP is out there right now on the street. There's going to be a couple of milestone dates where they're receiving questions, issuing addendums, and then I can't see the date up there because of the captions. The closing date will be Friday, January 19th, 2024, and then the other critical date will be are hoping to go back for council approval for the RFP on March 2024. And that's important because there's a 24 to 32 month, process through procurement, through bus design. So that's why it's super critical to get that out right now and get it designed. Also note that we've been working with our partners at DMC and Mayo on the procurement to ensure, they reviewed the RFP to make sure it looked all good. Also help provide input on design elements of the 60-foot electric buses. So everything we do, we typically do in a lockstep with our partners. It's not moving forward. There we go. Other upcoming milestones, just make sure I didn't skip anything. Nope. Right-of-way and land acquisitions. So what you can expect to see once we get our NEPA approval in November, we'll be going to City Council for a request to approve the right-of-way land acquisition negotiations. So we're taking a similar approach that we did on North Broadway and 65th Street with, the negotiation thresholds. So you'll be seeing that on 11/20. Once we get that out and NEPA is approved, we'll be sending out introduction and notification letters to all the property owners along the route. There's about 50 to 60 permanent and temporary easements that we'll need to acquire. There's only one full property acquisition that we'll need, and that's the property for the St. Mary's Transit Plaza. So not a lot of property to acquire, but it will, they all are required to have appraisals, appraisal reviews, and then negotiations. So we expect negotiations, President Carlson?
Finish your thought.
Okay, so we expect negotiations and appraisals to begin in December 2023 and go until March of 2024. And then closing and recording of the properties in August.
So is that DMC dollars that will go towards the right-of-way acquisition or property acquisition, or how is the financing for that?
Yeah, so they'll be funded within the Link transit funding. So I don't know if that's actually local match or if we're going to be using FTA funding for that.
Since it's ahead of the grant award, I guess is my point.
Thank you, President Carlson. And that is exactly the issue. Once we get the grant award, which we anticipate in May 2024, then it's a split between what comes out of FTA funding, and then the local match is DMC dollars.
Okay, thank you for that. Councilmember Wall.
I come to this a little bit later than all the people up here. How much land, it's a defined roadway already. How much land are we talking about buying?
Yeah, so actually like in fee title, buying, it's only one full acquisition of that plaza, so one building. The permanent and temporary easements, there, I don't want to minimize it by saying slivers of land, but we really worked and we're mindful of trying to keep it within the existing right of way, so we wouldn't need to acquire a lot of property. You know, there's some areas even in front of St. Mary's where we'll have to acquire more permanent easement just for that larger transit station that has a vertical circulator that goes down into the tunnels. But the other stations are a little bit smaller. We try to keep the profile tight, so we'd have to reduce the amount of property acquisition.
Okay.
Yep. Good questions.
Oh, Mayor.
As long as we're taking a break, I was saving up my comments, but I have two that to date. One was, and it came to mind when I was signing contracts for the art. Since we don't have approval yet, is the process set up so that as we've moved along, when the federal government supports you to a certain point, you're pretty much guaranteed approval, so we're not doing anything or spending anything and then have them say, we've changed our mind? So can you just explain that process and assure me that we're not going to get stuck with something at the end and they would say no?
Yeah, I think some of the really good signs that we've seen are the PMOC is a huge milestone, that project management oversight consultant. If there was any wishy-washiness at all, they wouldn't assign us PMOC. We're about 90% through our NEPA documents. Once that clears, that's another big hurdle. I don't know, Cindy, if there's any other.
Well, and I would also, sorry, thank you, Mayor Norton, members of City Council. So I would just reiterate what Josh has said, and also Ia is online, and she's probably the greatest resident expert we have on FTA process. But as Josh indicated, getting a PMOC assigned was a huge, huge milestone in terms of the work. So technically, it's not approved until, they get you the agreement, but, all things point towards we are following at a cadence and in compliance that has not raised a concern with FTA. I guess, Ia, if you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, I see you raising your hand. Go ahead and speak when you're ready. Might need to switch her over to being a panelist.
Well, in the meantime, I can ask my second one, which is about the buses. It showed a picture of our traditional bus. And as I recall, these were supposed to look more like special trains, and they're going to deviate from the traditional city bus look. Is that still the plan?
Yeah, and Ia would be the resident expert in that as well. There are, as we know, there's only 2 American-made bus manufacturers.
Mhm.
So there are different design elements that you can include.
Mhm.
A lot of the design will have to be done with wrapping, and you can do things like wheel well covering to hide the wheels to make it look more like a train, less like a bus. I don't know if Ia is able to.
Yeah, that was
Gotcha,
some of
yeah.
the assurances early on, that it was more pointy nosed. It looked more like a train than a bus, and that it wouldn't look like all of our other buses. That was part of the promise at the beginning of this. So I'm just wanting to make sure we haven't stepped away from that concept.
Hi, Ia. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I missed a little bit of that last part, but in regards to the funding piece of it, just wanted to explain maybe a little bit about how the federal funding works. We have pre-award authority, and so what that means is that we can spend money now, even though we don't technically have a grant award yet, and it will go towards that. So very similar to what our design cost is right now, that's all going to go towards the project as a whole. So they want you to start the NEPA or the land acquisition ahead of time. And so you will have to spend some funding ahead. So like I said, even our design, our art, anything that goes towards the project as a whole is part of that pre-award authority. So similar to what the critical part was, that we cannot start before NEPA, and we expect NEPA to be completed at the end of November. So
Thank you. Yeah,
Hope
the
that
second
helps.
part that you didn't hear was about the purchase of what were supposed to look like trains and not our normal buses. And that was part of the initial discussion that these weren't going to look like all the other city buses, that the bus rapid transit was going to be more train-like. Are we still looking
Yep.
that way?
Yep, so in that RFP process, we didn't want to be too prescriptive. We did ask that they come up with 3 different concepts for us to review. And so we'll be looking at those. We provided some generic like requirements to say that we want certain features. We didn't want to say we want it to look like a train or a trolley or anything like that. We just wanted them to come up with different concepts. So we'll be reviewing that, and when we do evaluate it, we've got DMC and Mayo on our evaluation panel. We also have a group of us that will be reviewing it. So it will be there's going to be quite a few reiterations or like iterations of review, and then they'll be coming to the council for approval.
Councilmember Kirkpatrick, you had a follow-up?
I just wanted to acknowledge the mayor's question and appreciating the design process and how everything changes. And I agree that what was talked about in the beginning, hopefully we can bring that forward. But at the same time, the other side of the coin, I certainly don't want folks to be spending extra money for fender skirts that camouflage wheels, et cetera. I mean, there's a practicality, fun, train-like practicality. I don't know. So I appreciate your comment. And I appreciate Ia saying that, you know, that RFP went out broadly and generically so that we can really get the best product for our ridership. So.
All right, Councilmember Dennis?
Thank you. I have 2 questions. One is there going to be advertising on the bus that it's free for like people who aren't paying attention, people who are struggling with homelessness, people who are visiting people? Is there going to be something very clear on all the buses that say, hey, it's free, you can ride up and down, it's back and forth? Because I feel a lot of people right now don't know and will not know.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to get that message out early and then often, especially at the beginning, as we're trying to increase our ridership. So there'll definitely be a communication campaign. There'll be some local advertisements here or there.
Oh, I'm sorry, like on the bus, like to have like the word free ride up and, you know, or some, much more design than
Yep.
what I'm saying. But I feel like there's so many people who aren't going to read emails, or, I mean, I'm talking people that I've, you know, busy lives, struggling paycheck to paycheck, who would benefit from this, but they won't know about it. So is there going to be any, again, I'm repeating myself, but anything on the bus itself, in the bus stations, to let people know it's free?
Yeah, I would say I'll let Deputy City Administrator Steinhauser also weigh in, but there are digital kiosks at each platform that could provide an opportunity to advertise that this is a free system, hop on and give you some just general guidance on the route location, how to ride, whatnot.
Oh, it was.
Sure, thank you. Councilmember Dennis, members of the council. So in addition to what Josh has said, what our conversations are, what does the branding look like? And that branding experience is not only the marketing and communications across the system, but what happens on site at each station, what happens on the bus. So we haven't got into that level of detail other than to say that there is technology available, and we know that there'll be a branding package, and communicating that message out about free ridership is a part of that branding message, but we've not gotten down into that level of detail of what sign will exist where on the bus. But we do have technology, so it's a comment we will take back and make note.
Thank you. Yeah, a physical sign won't have tech issues, you know, like I just feel there's a lot of times tech fails, or people who aren't techie or who don't have the ability to, for whatever reason, a sign would probably be good on the bus and in the station. My other question was raised by a constituent at the council meeting about glass use in these stations, and about how many birds are killed by running into these. And he used examples of I don't know, Orioles. I can't remember what bird he saw dead because of being hit by these. Is there been looked through that lens of safety of environment, having bird safe stations?
I mean, I can't recall a specific conversation about bird safe glass. It could have happened. I'll let Ia, if you are aware of more than I am, please raise your hand. I would say that a lot of these stations, all the stations will have art components. So there'll be not just totally transparent glass on like every single panel of the station platforms. There'll be some art incorporated.
She has her hand raised. Do you want?
Yeah,
to
do
weigh
you
in?
want to weigh in on that?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
so I'm definitely not an expert in this, but there are mechanisms or methods of like glass reflection so that it deters birds from flying into the glass. Like where we've got the St. Mary's station, there's going to be a lot of glass, especially on the roof. And so there are some ways to do it. We haven't identified exactly what that would be, but there are things out there.
Okay, so can it be like given as like a update to
Mhm.
council on what's being done to protect the wildlife?
Yep,
That'd be
yeah,
great.
we
Thank you.
can provide a weekly council update on that
Okay,
for sure.
perfect. Thank you.
Right, I think we're good to continue on.
All right, the last two bullets on the slide are just advancing design. So we're wrapping up our 60% going into 90% design. That's really when you start getting into the more survey engineering heavy design aspects. We also are going to be beginning our FTA risk review process. So that's our risk mitigation meeting is scheduled for January, and that's where our PMOC and the FTA and the city will meet and go through our large risk mitigation schedule. And there's where I identify every possible risk under the sun that we can think of, and then we find ways that we can mitigate those risks.
And Josh, remind me, does Mayo or DMC participate in these meetings with our federal partners? Okay.
Yep. Construction updates. So one of the things that will also be going in front of City Council in January is to advertise for construction management RFP. So in that risk register, that risk mitigation process, there is a couple lines of our capacity, our staffing, our ability to deliver these projects. And one ways that we can actually mitigate that is by hiring a consultant to help us with the bid packaging, the phasing, the constructability, reviewing the 90% documents ahead of time, just to flag, just gives another set of eyes to flag any issues up front. So we're hoping to bring them on during the 90% design process so they can follow through in the project early on and be very active in those conversations. And then in February of 2024, we'd like to award the construction management bid for those services. You'll see that orange colored box. Those are the next milestones will actually be in front of council, just to give everyone a sense of when we'll be back in front of you. And then for construction, we hope to advertise for construction bidding in August and then award construction in October 2024. Actual construction, we hope to start December 2024 through July 2026. We'll be testing and commissioning the buses just to make sure the operators, the line, everything's running smoothly. Bus chargers, all those things on-site chargers, off-site chargers, through February through November 2026, and then start service November 2026.
I have a very quick question. So for the construction management RFP, is that like we've done with Cross Anderson for Silver Lake, or is it like one person with particular expertise that we need overseeing?
No, it's a consultant firm, and it could be, we might even split up the bid packages in, 4 different bid packages. So it could be engineering, it could be architecture, it could be West Transit Village. And we could have either one entity, like one of the larger firms that has done our construction work on Soldiers Field, Discovery Walk, heart of the city, to either bid on a certain part of it or all of it, because there are some different elements, like our offsite charging stations over at PWO TOC is very different than the underground engineering along 2nd Street.
Sure. Okay.
All right, and now we're going into business forward and communication, so I'll invite my colleague Jamie up.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Jamie Rothy with DMC. It's good to be here. I'm going to take a couple minutes to talk through business forward and communication. So as Josh mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, this is another element where all of our project partners work together. So in all of our meetings and coordinating and getting ready for the project, Mayo Clinic, DMC, and the city of Rochester all together working on this. And it makes a really great team to bring all those different perspectives and conversations as we start to build out the tactics to this. A quick reminder what Business Forward is. It's a methodology that was created. The first project actually that we used it on was the Heart of the City project. And we used it because there was a number of reasons why. We know there's an unprecedented amount of construction happening in our community, and we needed to take a different approach to construction to mitigate the risk to our businesses and the users of these public spaces in our business districts. We recognize that this investment brings a lot of long-term impact later on, but there's a lot of short-term impact that happens with those businesses, and we wanted to be mindful of those. We also wanted to make sure that our stakeholders were a part of the project. We do a lot of engagement in all of the work that we do, but sometimes the construction phase gets forgotten. And so we wanted to make sure that the stakeholders that are in these areas of construction are part of that process. We want to understand what their concerns are. We want to understand their business a bit more, who their customers are. That information then informs the business forward strategy, how we phase a project, when we phase it. It also helps to build our communication strategies. For example, with Heart of the City, it informed that we had a weekly call with a dedicated phone line and a weekly newsletter that went out. That also informed other projects like our Broadway Sidewalk project. We built our communication strategy a bit differently because of those needs. So we take all of that information from our stakeholders, and again, that informs the business forward strategy. That strategy has really three buckets. Something we call construction microphasing. So how can we break down the project to really make sure that we're thinking about it in different phases and that we're looking at it piece by piece. So an example might be with Heart of the City. We looked at when were restaurants using patios and how do we phase around that so the restaurants got to use full use of their patios. And then we remove the patios and replace them during a time that maybe restaurants weren't using them. Also high density times or high use areas. So it's just a quick example of that. For communication, I gave a quick example of that as well, where we'll work with all of the stakeholders to understand what their communication needs are during different phases of the project and then build a strategy that meets those needs and check in with them along the way. And then programming and activation. We all know when we see cones or signs, sometimes we don't want to go down that area. And we want to make sure that we're attracting people to those areas. And so how do we do that in a mindful way? And we ask for feedback from the stakeholders in that process. And so that is a part of this project as well, is all three of those components in the business forward strategy. And again, as a reminder, we've used this in Heart of the City. We've used this in the Broadway Sidewalk project, and then also in the Discovery Walk project that we're currently working on. Are you my Vanna? How do I move it to the next slide? Thank you, Josh. So this slide is just a quick visual. This will be one of the largest or the largest project that we are applying the business forward strategy on. There's a number of parcels throughout the whole entire area. And so our first step of the business forward strategy as we get ready for construction is really indexing all the businesses along the corridor. We've taken a bit of a kind of a comprehensive approach to this. We wanted to really take as a team again and understand what the impact is, not only along the corridor and along the areas that might have direct impact, but the corridors that lead into Second Avenue as well, who are using those areas and the businesses along those areas. So we have teams of people right now that are gathering all that information. And that information helps to build our communication strategies out to making sure that a lot of times the city might only have owner information. We want to understand who leases those areas and what's happening. So that is a process that's happening right now. The other thing that our team is doing is researching best practices with similar systems. This is something that we did with Heart of the City as well. Before we went into construction, we met with a number of different cities to understand what their construction mitigation strategies were around plazas and retail. And we're meeting with different cities to try to understand what did they do with these long corridors and how did they phase them? What did they do when there was impact in these different areas? And as I mentioned in the beginning, we're categorizing each of these different things and stakeholders, sorry, not things, stakeholders, to understand how we can make a really focused effort and understanding what their businesses are and what their needs are. So as we think about this 2-year construction cycle, we have everything that we need to help us build that communication strategy along the way. And then the next slide, please. And then on top of this, we mentioned communication for business forward. So those are the businesses that are impacted by the construction or around the construction. But we're also building communication engagement plans in general for our community, making sure that they have the most up-to-date information and have access to the information that they need in a timely way. Again, this is coordinated between all of our entities, city, DMC, and Mayo Clinic. We all have different stakeholders and different needs, but we want to really make sure that we're working closely together. We've brought on RAP Strategies, who has worked on a number of different projects in our community to help provide some initial consultation to understand how we can organize ourselves and the things that we should be working through in this early phase. And then as an example, after today's presentation, we have conversations with you. We'll build a press release package that'll go out to our media that recaps what we're talking about in our presentation and then any discussion that happens here. So we're sharing it up front, and people can find that information quickly. And with that, that's the update for communication and business forward.
Councilmember Palmer?
Yeah, I've got an experience at North Broadway. And so we use the business forward, I think, a lot on that. And that was interesting. A couple of the problems I ran into is in the contracts that they said, well, it wasn't written in the contracts, we can't enforce that. And even now, I've got weeds growing all over the flower bed and said, well, it's a subcontractor, we can't do anything about it. So I will ask when the contracts come to ask a question. I'm not going to read the contracts because it'll probably be 9,000 pages, but I'm going to ask questions on, what are we going to do? And also, a question I have for you is, are you going to keep Second Street open then? The full length when you're doing construction?
Can I answer that question?
Yeah, I mean, that is still something we're working through, and that's one of the pieces through 90% design. And as we hire a construction management service to help us understand like what can we keep open. There is a section right in front of St. Mary's that there's some very deep utility infrastructure that we're going to be improving. I want to say it's between like 12th and 16th, 14th. 12th and 14th, where we're gonna have to do basically a complete reconstruct. So it'll be very, very challenging to keep that section of Second Street open. We're hoping to get in and out of there as soon as possible, but there's gonna be a detour route for that one section. For the rest of the sections, it's less invasive, so we'll be able to maintain traffic.
Okay, because what happened with North Broadway was that we bid it, saying we're gonna keep it all open, this is gonna happen. They came back really expensive and they said, well, if we just lose all control and just close the road down, we can save money. And so we didn't balance what that did to the businesses and everything else. And so I don't know if that was our best decision. The last question I have for you is assessments. So all the property owners along the line, are they being assessed for the improvements that are going to be happening?
No assessments, and I'm glad you brought that up. We are providing tremendous value in front of each of these businesses. Having a dedicated primary transit, rapid transit system in front of your doorstep does create value. I mean, it creates more people driving by your business, creates more people seeing it, creates more foot traffic. But no, we are not assessing any businesses across.
And why aren't we?
Well, I would say, I guess I don't have a great answer for that.
Your Honor, you have to have a statutory authority to assess certain projects, and there really isn't one for transit improvement projects at this point in time.
But we're improving sidewalks, we're improving curb, we're improving road, we're improving all this as we go down. So, I mean, on North Broadway, I could argue the point that we're not, helping out the businesses. We're just, we're assessing them. So I don't quite.
You could make the policy conversation, if you want to. Obviously, this has the value of being integrated with the federal project with the DMC funding as well. But you could make the policy decision to assess the 11th through 16th section, which is a full reconstruct of the street. The rest of it is really transit specific right of way improvements. So that may be a policy conversation the council wants to have in the future.
And I guess I'd like to have that. So, thank you.
Councilmember Kirkpatrick?
Thank you. Will you please share the detour route with us?
Once we have it, we'll absolutely bring that back to you. Yep.
Awesome.
And I'll say that we are also working with Mayo and their, Bold Forward Unbound project. We don't want to be tripping over our projects here. So once we have a better idea of exactly the phasing and the timeline of where this construction is going to happen, we're going to be working hand in hand with Mayo and their project to make sure that they're all aligned.
Councilmember Dennis?
Okay, thank you. So I was really happy to see that you've talked to renters too. I feel like a lot of times people just focus on the owners and profit things like that. I know I've expressed concern. I've had many people come to me with concern about the businesses downtown struggling, keeping things for people to do and have an actual destination downtown. If they are losing profit because people are like, oh, well, we don't want to deal with that mess, right? We're going to go up to, Northwest Rochester, Southwest, wherever. We're going to avoid downtown. Is there any sort of compensation or something to help businesses out who you might not foresee having a hit, but really because of the construction might not make it?
Ms. Steinhauser?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Dennis, members of the council. So I think that's why part of the business forward strategy is to try and, make sure that what we understand is what is happening before the construction of this project, what's happening during, and what happens afterwards. We are currently looking at technology software that helps us understand how people move, where their point of origination is, where they're going to, and where they go after they leave that place. And the reason we're looking at is to help us understand what are the patterns that are happening to separate fact from fiction in terms of nobody came this weekend, or I saw 2,000 people and there was no place to park, and really understanding what's happening at the time. And the beauty of some of the technology that we're looking at is that it can allow us to pivot a business forward strategy rather quickly, because we understand the patterns that are or are not happening as a result of construction or project coordination. So again, that is part of that using data to inform a business forward strategy, along with building those relationships with property owners and businesses along the corridor. And we acknowledge that it's not just the corridor, but the greater downtown area, as there's deviations into the downtown as a result of construction activity that happens, that we are able to adjust on fairly short notice, because we're using good data to inform a communication and business forward strategy. So it's a really great question. It's top of mind. We talk about it literally at our weekly meetings, if not more often.
All right, well, I'll just end with the wrap-up slide here, and we'll open it up for more questions and conversation. But this is just the next 3 times we'll be in front of City Council for authorization to approve. So it'll be November 17th for that right-of-way land acquisition negotiations, and then January sometime for hopefully advertise for construction management, and then award that construction management in February-ish.
Ms. Elms?
I think November 20th is the next,
Yeah.
is what that should be. That's when you have to have it done.
Yes.
I don't know.
17th.
November 20th is the 17th is like a Friday.
Good correction.
Ready,
20th.
ready to rock by then. Councilmember Dennis, did you have another comment or question?
Yeah, so the slide you had up kind of shows the bus, the red where the the link transit is going to be. I guess you have to kind of maybe see how it manifests, but I foresee a lot of confusion with visitors, people who, this has a huge road for many people to travel. And, you have, Uber drivers, and you have people ordering pizza, or I'm thinking of all the things that, that sometimes block one lane because there's a moment, or emergency vehicles, of course, would. What's going to happen if there is like a big something that needs to have trucks to come in, or construction? I know, is there a plan B for people who are relying on this transportation after maybe a year or so? They're like, that's my transportation, and all of a sudden it gets blocked because of something. I'm just.
Yeah, and I'd say that's one of the factors that went into the locally preferred option to go with a transit system, a bus rapid transit system, as opposed to a light rail or fixed rail system, is that it is more flexible, it's more adaptable to construction, to unknown circumstances. Underground utility blows up, you got to shut down the street for a while. You can reroute much easier bus rapid transit. Of course, you have to have the communication, plan then to back that up, to make sure that people are aware of,
Which is a risk, part of the risk management.
which is, part of the risk management. Yep.
Okay, and thank you. And then another part, question about risk. So there's obviously a security risk when you have any kind of transportation. What is being done? Is that going to be, I know we talked a little bit, just maybe refresh my memory. Is that the police being utilized? Of course, police are taxpayer funded, and you use it, one resource in one area, you're going to take it away from another area. So what is being done to prevent crime and other issues on them?
Ia has her hand raised. Would you like
Yeah,
her to
go ahead,
start?
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to add on maybe to the previous question that Councilmember Dennis had about what happens if there's like a detour or whatnot. So we do anticipate that, yes, it's never going to be always 100% open. If there are detours, we're going to have communication, and then of course announcements. We do have our message boards at the stations, and then we also have are other buses that we can use to help alleviate if there should be some detour emergency, whether it's weather related or as Josh said, utilities or whatever. So I just want to just add on that we do have currently we do detours all the time, so there is a communication plan. And then also your question on the security part of it, we have a security plan that we're working with Mayo and RPD. We have buses that have cameras. We have cameras on the stations. So there is a network of security systems in place. I think we've got the blue light call buttons at the station platforms. We also have ambassadors that will be out there. We have attendants that will be out there. So there will be presence at the stations and in the buses.
Council President Carlson, if I could just also add to what Ms. Zhang indicated, we also have in our staffing model that it includes a dedicated police sergeant and officers. We have submitted for a COPS grant to support funding for BRT officers for this position, but the staffing model does include a number of officers. I think it's a sergeant and 6 officers, if I'm not mistaken, that are specific to this BRT system and greater BRT downtown corridor.
And those would be paid for through the transit system, not property tax.
One more question. I'm so sorry. I don't mean, please interrupt if there's. My other question. So I see a lot of the needs of people in Ward 6 and places that they come to the park or something and they would love to utilize this. It'd be great to go from Soldiers Field to, so you have your dog and your cooler and your, 4 kids who have maybe special needs. I'm using like, I'm making this kind of, but that's a real thing with people's lives. So I don't know if you allow dogs, maybe service animals, of course, but let's leave the dog out. Let's say, but you have a situation where there is a delay, like, there's something where a cooler breaks open or, something that's not but all of a sudden, blow up diaper or something. And that bus can't be used. And then, so you have this amount of time and maybe amount of time between stops, and also something takes that bus out of commission. What happens then? Is there another bus that can swing in and pick that up? Or, is there a way of relaying information that says, oops, you're waiting for this in 10 minutes, it's gonna be 20 minutes, and that's gonna back up the whole system? Or maybe I'm using too much examples, but I feel like that might happen.
So Ms. Lighthouser or Ia, but go ahead, Cindy, and then Ia can go.
Yes, thank you. I'll just start. I would say we're planning for service disruptions, whether it's a disruption that happens on the bus and takes it out of commission, as Ia indicated, that there are backup buses that would jump in the case that we had to take a bus for whatever reason, had to take a bus offline and not to create a disruption service. Our agreement with Mayo and the reason that they're funding this operation to make it no fare system does have performance measures in it. And so we have looked at those different scenarios. What happens if a bus is taken out of commission temporarily? What kind of backup do we have with other buses in order to continue service? So we have contingency plans for those. I don't know, Ia, if you have other things you want to add.
Yeah, I can just add that we are ordering 12 buses for the system, 12 60-footer buses. We technically, according to how the schedule would work, we need 9. So there is a spare ratio that we would have extra buses on hand. Not only that, but we also have our other buses that we can utilize should we need to.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Wall.
Did we get any helpful feedback from business owners on the use of Business Forward in the 3 previous projects?
Yeah, most certainly. And we develop all our business forward strategies with those business owners, stakeholders, residents. So there are a lot of lessons learned, whether it's Heart of the City or Discovery Walk or Soldiers Field or Broadway. Each project's a little bit different. The work that's being done and the scale of project obviously changes, the business forward elements to it. So we definitely work to understand, what time are the deliveries? When is their highest customer base? Are they a destination or appointment based where it's a little bit easier? They might have a back door. They can tell their clients ahead of time, hey, there's construction out front, please use the back door. Or are they more just spontaneous visits like McDonald's, for instance? People just, they're hungry, they want their Big Mac, so they walk in. So identifying and working with them to keep access open is usually the primary concern. And then, of course, phasing. And just to add to Councilmember Palmer's response, it is important to build that early on in all of the contracts and set that expectation that there's going to be maybe some inefficiencies in how we're doing construction, but it's going to be for the benefit of those business owners.
And did the business owners express satisfaction with the way we were able to work with them?
Yeah, construction's never 100% pleasant. There's ups and downs. But I would say there's definitely an appreciation of the effort that the teams put forward and just listening to their concerns, trying new ideas. Whenever we tried an idea, we acknowledged it, we tracked it. Did it work? Yes. What's wrong? How can we improve it? That way we had literally a spreadsheet full of ideas that we tried. And nothing was too small or maybe there's some things that are too outrageous, but we were open-minded to most everything.
Madam President,
Sure.
may I just piggyback on the answer? I appreciate the question from Councilmember Wall. And not to tell a war story, but I think it's a bit of a shout out to this effort that has been in the works now for a number of years. The city was the respondent from a lawsuit a couple of years ago from a downtown business that was really making the case that the construction activities had affected their business activities. It was overlapping in part with the pandemic experience as well, so it was complicated. But through the discovery process, it was abundantly clear the level of efforts that were made, the significant communication, nearly day-to-day communication from city and associated actors, reaching out, trying to minimize the impact of those activities and to do whatever was reasonably possible to accommodate the needs for ongoing business activity. It was extremely impressive from my perspective, put the city in a good position to defend itself. And that was a case that was dismissed on summary judgment, really partly as a reflection of that communication and activity that was done on the front end. So I would expect that same activity, that same approach, that same partnership to be lending benefits going forward.
Thank you.
Can I make some comments on this the answer?
And then we'll move on to
Yeah.
Councilmember King.
I'll just say, as mayor, I get calls from people that are unhappy, but also happy. And in this instance, I did get quite a bit of feedback, particularly on the latest, when Peace Plaza was being done and when we've been, some of our more recent construction. Not only what did people feel listened to, but they knew they had someone they could call. And I think that really says a lot about the work that they've done in advance. People may not have always gotten the solution that they wanted, but they knew that they could call Josh or his team and someone would respond immediately and come down and address it. So I did get really great feedback about that. Just want you to know.
Councilmember Palmer, did you want to weigh in on this exact conversation? Go ahead and then we'll do Keith.
On North Broadway, the largest project since flood control, Public Works did a really, really good job. They learned a lot, but businesses, I'd say 95% of them are very happy with the communications, and odd things come up, things you can't plan for. And that was an experience that I'd say was a good experience for the businesses and for me to have them respond and think about what was going on. And there's things that you just don't think about, and they come up and they did a good job of responding to it. So.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Keen, thanks for your patience. Go ahead.
Thanks. So again, I just want to get some things straight from the formal status of the Small Starts Grant. I know I heard that we've got a project manager assigned, which I think is a sign it's coming, but it seems like there's a formality that we're getting our grant not until, is it March of 2024? May of 2024? It appears we're going to commit funds before that. Is that accurate? Or is there any sort of promise to a promise here, or are we really going to start awarding contracts and find out 3 months later that we're getting the grant?
I think we've already committed a significant amount of funds. Are you talking about additional contract?
I'm looking at
awards?
the schedule here now that says there's commitment to contractors and commitments to purchasing buses a couple of months before the small starts. I'm also getting good indication that by assigning the project manager, there is a form of commitment there. But I'm just trying to make sure I understand this. So I was going to have you react to that.
Yeah, and I think Ia kind of touched on this and did, is very knowledgeable. She did very well on this. So yeah, I don't know if you wanted to respond to that.
Yeah,
Realize I'm the only person that can see.
oh.
Yeah, go ahead. I see you.
That's probably a good thing. I'm
Oh,
glad no one else can
no.
see me. Yeah, so to your question about expending funds before we get the grant, yes, we are already committed quite a few already with the design work. The rating that we got and then the commitment of the project management oversight consultant really is getting us one step. We're just taking the steps we need to for that grant award later come in 2024. The technicality of it is that we get that award and we actually don't get the agreement until much later. That's just the nature of how federal funds work. We get, as I mentioned, pre-award authority, which means we can expend funds before we actually get the grant. And that's how that's all our federal funds right now. And that's just the process that they go through. It's typical.
Okay. Again, I knew I was watching for a date this fall, that I thought there was a commitment this fall, but it may have been that commitment to the project manager. I do take it as a commitment, but I'm still watching out for us getting overextended. I fully expect this to come through based on our ratings. I don't know if I expected it the exact amount, but I have every reason to believe it's going to come through that way. But I'm still voicing a concern I know we've had long 3 years of investment on this, but it's been sort of pre-development and now we're making these big steps, commitments. But again, I want to point it out and make sure you guys feel comfortable that we're in a good spot to do this.
Ms. Elms?
Yep, Councilmember Keen, council members, I think the team has described it well. And when I think about the federal award of funds for this, there are not a huge number of projects that go through to this stage. So because there could be lots of projects that would go forward and be in the queue, but not have the type of commitment that's already coming through, I would just say that the federal government is it's to their benefit in some ways to wait to actually do the award to show that we actually are committed to keeping moving forward with the project, because they do get concerned about if they make an award and then something doesn't work out. They don't want to put federal dollars towards something that maybe doesn't have the local ability to get it delivered. And so in some ways, having that out there in the future helps them to understand that we're continuing to move forward. It's not super comfortable, but communities that aren't willing to do that typically aren't getting that high number for the project scoring, aren't getting now federal dollars committed with the project management oversight group. So they have skin in the game now with federal dollars through their project manager team that is coming and helping us. They've had also their dollars with their side of reviewing the NEPA. And I do think that once you're through the NEPA, that really gives you a lot of assurance as well, because it's saying that it's buildable and there's not going to have to be some significant change or some very significant delay because you have to redesign something and move forward. So there is a little bit of a method to the madness that is there with some of how that federal funding comes through to make sure that they're committing dollars to partners that will be able to deliver on those dollars.
Okay. Again, I'm not surprised by the response here. I guess I'm just acknowledging that there is sort of the typical dance of how much we're committed versus somebody else. But I'm again, I just wanted to make sure it got voice on a similar budget discussion, but it's very different. It's the project side we're talking all the time with building this, but in the operational side, we have the operations things, and we got the partnership with Mayo. I'm really glad to see that. It's my understanding that's about 20% of the cost of running something like this, and the other 80% comes from state and federal. So my question is, are we doing any work to make sure that as we get into the fall of 26, that those other funds that right now we're getting state and federal funding to run our zips and our bus lines, that's going to go up dramatically in the fall. I think about 20 million or more. Is there any work happening to ensure that's going to be in place or that that's not going to stall because it's such a big um, uh, increase from what we have right now?
Want Ia to respond? Ia, you've had your hand up for a while, so go ahead and speak to what you need to, including Councilmember Keen's question.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on maybe to the previous comment about the funding and over or pre-committing ourselves. I just want to add that we are very aware of when federal funds can be allowed. And so the NEPA approval is a critical point, which we have been waiting for that in order to start our right-of-way acquisition, and then also our bus procurement. So I just wanted to not like address Councilmember Keen's question about that. There are certain dates that we do need to be aware of, and the NEPA is quite an important key one for us. So we're following that process, and that's why we're waiting for that right of way to begin after NEPA. And then also for the bus procurement, even though we have the RFP out, we can't commit any funds until that NEPA is approved, which according to our time frame, it'll fall in line with that. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, yes, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. And then as to your question, Councilmember Keen, in regards to like the funding, yes, this is quite a bit come 2026, 27, when we start operations. We've started working it through with MnDOT on how that would look like from their end. MnDOT is the Minnesota Department of Transportation that where transit funds are funneled through to us. And so that operations piece of it is very important. Federal funds will be allotted or apportioned according to our use, ridership and population density. And so there's a formula that gets apportioned to us. But in regards to the state funding, that is a critical, important thing that we are going to continue to have to work with the state on how that gets done.
Council President Carlson, if I might just add to that, we have already begun those conversations. We a couple of weeks ago, we hosted a MnDOT team on site. There are a couple of new players at MnDOT that will be involved in some of that policy decision making around the distribution of dollars. So we brought them here, highlighted the project, took them along the corridor as an introduction. And again, Ia, in her role as a liaison to the state representatives and to FTA, is kind of leading that conversation both on the capital side and then what happens post-construction on the operations side. But that work has begun and those relationships have started.
Yeah, that's good. Because again, I know we're really pleased with the operation side, that the city's responsibility, but considering the growth it is for the state and federal matches, I was making sure we had some attention to that. So thank you. Last point, I guess, is it's October 23. I was watching this coming up, but I guess I was a little surprised, and I can understand we don't have any street layouts in here. We're not showing like, here's the terminal design. There's not that kind of things done, and it's probably from where we are, but it seems like by the time we're going to see those, we're going to be in commitment times. I was also looking for that sort of like higher level budget and the budget concerns we have going into this next 30 months. I mean, we've got this large grant from FTA, we've got the DMC money, but do we have 30% risk on top of that we haven't, as we get into these either right-of-way works or construction work or get under the ground and find out we didn't have it planned fully? I want to start, are we doing that oversight from here, or is that happening somewhere else?
I think there's contingency already built in. I don't know if it's not 30%, is it 10%?
I want to say it's even more than 10%. We've got a healthy amount of contingency on this project. I don't know if you know off the top of your head.
I don't know, but it is healthy, although we have tapped into it. So, but there is contingency funds.
Yeah,
If I could, sorry, Council President Carlson. We also have a follow-up. I believe we have a study session in January, if I'm not mistaken. And so we can bring back to you, we won't be at 100% design. We will be well into advancing to 100% design. We'll have evolved the functional art components. And so we can very easily bring back to you what I heard, in identifying, we know the easements and the property acquisition, general footprint, we can share those with you. We can share the advanced design, and we can certainly share with you where we're at in terms of budget.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Again, just to, yeah, and not so much for me specifically, but to start sharing that this is where we're going as we get to this point, and not do it at the point where now we've got bids out, and if there's going to be a change, because I'm sure some of these things are like which side of the stop sign the stop is at, or the terminal design on the southeast is still important for me to see how that ends up laying out, because who owns what and what the future of that is going to be important after the starts running in 2026. So thank you for that.
Councilmember. Councilmember Kirkpatrick. I don't know what it is.
I don't know what it is either, but I'm glad you called on me. Thank you. I'm uncomfortable with the fact that I have to ask these questions. So I'm doing it to represent my ward. In speaking with city administration and a Mayo representative, and this is around the security issues of the bus. I don't know how significantly our community is going to be changing in the next 3 years to warrant the level of security that's being suggested. However, when I was told that Mayo has had a hand in moving the proposed location for Olmsted County's housing support center, what I was told it was because we don't want to have to tell people they can't get on the bus. Yeah, I saw your eyebrow raise with that comment. I physically had to prevent my jaw from dropping open when I heard that comment. This is a public transportation system that we are funding, designing, welcoming the community to use. You have used the term free ridership and fare-free service. Ms. Steinhauser used the term a no-fare system. So I want to understand why we have such a significant need for security in 3 years when there is no data available to back up why we may need that. And
Should we start with Ms. Steinhauser, and if you have follow-up prompts, Councilmember Kirkpatrick, go ahead, okay?
Thanks.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Councilmember Kirkpatrick and members of the council. So first, let me just say we are not aware of Mayo driving that decision around the location of people experiencing homelessness. That's not been communicated to us, I will tell you. What the decision around what does the level of security look like for the BRT really was born out of a conversation with Chief Franklin, who prior to coming here, Police Chief Franklin, who prior to coming here was chief of a transit system. And so my personal conversations with him have been early in this process in terms of how do we staff up from an operations perspective, and what are the security things that we need to think about. So it was really through those conversations and from that lens of what does community policing look like on a free transit system that really drove the staffing model that we introduced to you a number of months ago. I would just say that I would say Mayo has been a partner in this. If I would think if there were apprehensions around offering a free, fare-free, no-fare system, that they would have not come to the table to the tune of millions of dollars every year to make this a fare-free system. So the staffing model was informed of mostly through conversations with the police department based on their years of experience and what it means, and in talking with similar transit systems, not only in Minnesota, but across the country, and being cognizant of the real versus perceived security issues on a free system, but also, as I said, I think if, I would find it very, hard to believe that Mayo would be willing to write a check for millions of dollars a year if they didn't want this to be a system that all could use.
Well, I believe that too, and I tend to agree with you. So it's, like I said, I did not want to have to ask this, and I'm concerned about what I had heard, and it was really quite appalling. So I would request of you to use your excellent community engagement that so many people have offered to be really proactive and exemplary to do that community engagement around the fact that this system is available for all people that exist in our community at any point in time that want to get on this transit system. So,
Yeah,
thank you.
absolutely. It's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any final discussion items? Councilmember Dennis?
Kind of on that note, what are I have a couple questions. What are the hours of the bus? Is it 24 hours?
It goes until midnight. So there'll be a peak service, which is 5 minutes, and then an off peak, which is every 10 minutes. You'll see a bus arrival, but it'll go till midnight every day.
18 hours.
Yeah.
Starts at 6 in the morning, goes till midnight.
So, kind of, not linked at all to, Councilmember Kirkpatrick's question. So I foresee when I grew up, there wasn't a lot of things for under 21 kids to do. So we would cruise. We would cruise the strip up and down and waste natural resources. And it was, but that's what we did, right? Well, what happens if there is, I'm not saying youth will do this, but maybe any age. What if you have cruisers, like people, joyriders who just want to, nothing to do, will ride for, all day because we want to chat with each other or want to sleep or want to do whatever. Is there any policy for people who like get on at the beginning and just, I'm using my example of I was a cruiser, like many hours, me and my friends would just drive for something to do.
Mhm. Yeah, that'll be part of our safety and security plan. I don't know if EA has anything else to add, but it is something that we're aware of. I know speaking with, the police force up at the Green Line in Minneapolis, they often know the frequent riders by name, and are very, friendly with them because they interact with them on a daily basis. But I don't know what we have exactly in our safety and security plan. EA or Cindy?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can maybe speak a little bit to that. So we do have like ridership, I'm trying to think of the word, conduct. And so our existing systems currently have where you can't be disruptive, eating, drinking, there's rules around that. And so I would say that disruption and, foul language or things that are deemed unsafe would be part of that. And that would be all part of our security plan here.
Ms. Steinhauser?
Yeah, if I may just also add to that. So there's the, what do you plan for, right? What do you have in your policies and procedures? But then it's about relationship building. And again, I got to give kudos to Ia when she was thinking about how do we staff up for this? And this idea of, in addition to, community police officers, who, as Josh said, and other systems, really build those relationships with those frequent riders. But also this is where we see, transit ambassadors can be also a resource in relationship building with frequent riders. It's okay to be a frequent rider. What we don't want is a disruption of service and an uncomfortable experience for anybody riding the system. And so one is, what are your policies and procedures? And two, what are the relationships that you have and the presence that you have on the system over the course of a day that helps, work hand in glove in terms of managing and making it a positive experience for as many riders as possible.
Okay, so if someone's tired, they can go and take a 5-hour nap and not disrupt people. It's good to know what kind of policies. I just want to say, I talked to someone just this weekend who was counting down the moments to, the opening of the link because of accessibility. He cannot see and was very like, this will be great freedom. So I know there's a lot of barriers for accessibility. There's even like language barriers, cognitive barriers, age barriers. You know, you have young people and a lot of people. But some people take more time to get on the bus. And let's say you have a couple friends, like 3 or 4 friends, they're all utilizing wheelchairs. They want to get on the bus together. I mean, is there a set amount of time between stops, or do they allow flex time? So if there is need for people to take more time to get on the bus, they have that.
Yeah, we're certainly mindful, and we're trying to do everything to make that boarding process really efficient. And that's from that level boarding to the wide opening doors to getting right to wheelchair accessible seating. Also having it be a fare-free system. You don't have to monkey around with a machine outside of the doors. And then I'd just say, like, we're a passionate community. So I hope and I know that the community would help people if they're trying to get on. We expect delays, you know, every 5 minutes. I'm not a transit operator, so I don't know if he has anything else to add, but can be made up. We know that whether you're trying to get a bike in, once again, we're trying to make it more efficient, so you're not putting your bike in the front of it, but you're bringing your bike in and putting it on a rack. That saves time. So we're trying to be mindful of all of those different things that take time when you're boarding a bus and minimize it.
Well, that's good. Just to make it truly accessible.
Yeah.
And then one of the huge things, benefits, you know, the reduced traffic, the benefit for the environment, which we need, you know, global warming and is a huge crisis. Are there any building environmental considerations, or are things being done to make sure that the construction of this project is being done as greenly, I don't know, as most environmentally sustainable and positive as possible?
Yeah, so as part of our National Environmental Policy Act, we have to make sure that, like, we're being both socially equitable as well as environmentally, those aren't the words, but both social justice and environmental justice through the entire project. As well as this is a DMC funded project, so it has to abide by any DMC sustainability goals, city sustainability goals. So those are all built into the project.
Okay, well, good. That's very important. And then my last, well, I have more questions, but the one, I know we have a whole another hour and 15 minutes allotted for this kind of topic. So my other question is artists. I mean, being chosen. I mean, how was it? What was the process to choosing the artists who are going to have their beautiful work? Are they local? Can you refresh my memory if this has been said?
Yeah, so early in the process, they actually released an RFQ, a request for qualifications. There was, I believe, over 100 responses to that RFQ. And then there's a team made up, and I'm not going to get all these right. Yeah, once again, jump in, but of people from the Art Center, a male representative, representatives from the city, and also 1 or 2 other representatives from other nonprofit firms in Rochester. And they went through a selection process to identify the top candidates. And then they were chosen out of the, like I say, 100 or so applications.
President Carlson, if I might just add to it, so we have a blend of local artists and a couple of national artists, so it's really, I believe we have more local artists than we do have national artists, but even national artists that have some local ties. So we're really excited to be bringing forward those concepts at some point. We also did a community conversations with the neighborhoods adjacent to the stations to get their input and feedback in the design process. Once the group of community partners in the city decided on the recommendations of who those local artists could be. Initially, I think we did have 1 or 2 that wound up having to bow out for personal reasons, and we found replacements. So it's been a very inclusive process.
Well, thank you. I'm really excited about writing it and teaching my kids how to write it so I can send them off and to the library. All right. Thank you so much for.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kirkpatrick.
Thank you. Just back to the security thing one more time. I think it was a couple of months ago, we had talked about, or you guys had told us that you were training certain drivers for these longer electric buses. Am I imagining that? Maybe, I don't know. I don't think I am, but are those going to be the RPT drivers that we have now that work under contract with TransDev? And the reason I'm relating this to security is because about a year ago, I don't know, I think the union rep is doing an excellent job, and I think Public Works has responded really, really well to when we have security issues. I know the mayor helped me a year ago with with some pretty significant policy changes. The drivers wanted to be able to use their cell phones, and I think the city administrator helped as well to just open it up for more security with the drivers. So is that going to be staying in place also, and then we're layering on that extra security piece? Or are we getting a whole new set of employees and drivers for these longer electric buses?
Yeah.
Yes, I can answer that. So in regards to training the drivers, yes, there will be there will need to be additional drivers, and they will be trained. Just the way you approach the station and how, so that you don't bump into it or too far away from the station. So definitely there is that period of time. That's why we need about 6 months of commissioning the buses and training the drivers for that, along with dispatch and operators and other things. So that's that part. And then in regards to whether it will be Transdev or not, our Transdev contract ends in 2026. And so we'll be required to revisit, or not revisit, but like consider whether we bring it in-house or we put it out for RFP again. And so that will be coming probably in another year or two, because it takes time to get that solicitation and get a new contractor on board if that's the case. So that process will be kind of not, I mean, it's right around that transition time, because like Transdev contract doesn't technically end until December of 2026. And the operations of BRT is actually going to come on mid-2026. So there will be a little bit of a transition period there. So definitely we will be working with Transdev to operate the BRT system for that period of time.
Awesome. Thank you, Ia.
All right. Any other discussion? Thank you so much to the team. This is so exciting, and appreciate the updates. We'll look forward to seeing the recommended contractor November, right?
Mhm.
All right.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks for being here, Ms. Rothy.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Zelms, upcoming study sessions.
Thank you, Council President, Council Members, Mayor Norton. We do have the 5th Monday on October 30th, so there is no study session or council meeting. And then we only have one item so far, although we're a bit out from November 6th, but that will be an update from Civic Music about some of their branding that they're looking at for Civic Music to make it more enticing for the community. Then a few other tentative things going forward, and we'll be on into 2024 before we know it.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Question on the, there's a list on our thing of like 7 or 8 other topics that we're trying to get in this year. Are those, I mean, we're obviously not going to get them in this year, but are there any things like there's one is on the West Transit Village. That's something that's probably into 2024.
That's probably in 2024 based on where we are with design and timing for West Transit Village.
Okay, thank you.
Patrick?
Looks like we got some open spots to bring back that urban forest master plan.
I will check with Mr. Whitman. That's who needs to bring it
Just
forward.
gonna
I
keep
believe it
plugging that along.
is on a report and recommendation at some point. But I would just remind everyone that they did reorganize in order to try to like get ahead of that. And we did just get awarded both $1 million grant for forestry, as well as just last week, a $500,000 relief grant. So there are things coming forward for that to actually deliver on the result, which may or may not involve 11 new people.
Thank you. And if we have a lot of open time, it would be really nice to do some DEI training. I think that's a much needed thing for this council. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good week, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.